everyone. Chris Martinson here, Peak Prosperity, obviously, here with another Off the Cuff. It's the 23rd of September, 2020, which means we're getting into an election cycle here. I just heard about that yesterday. Honestly, didn't know it was coming.
Not paying attention, huh?
So with us today, James Howard Kunstler. Jim, welcome to the program. It's good to have you.
A pleasure as usual.
So you're looking like Paul Bunyan. You're really rocking the northern sort of.
This is my long emergency uniform.
Swamp Yankee.
Yeah, in fact, I'm going to get some epaulets and maybe some gold frogging on the front, so I can be a proper officer of the long emergency corps.
Yes. Well, Colonel Kunstler, let's talk about the hand grenade that you just
General.
It just didn't rhyme as well alliteratively, but that's fine. General Kunstler. Unbecoming a general, you popped a pin on a grenade, got in the action, rolled it down the aisle, and that grenade said, can't go with the DNC this year. Going to have to vote for Trump. And I'm just wondering I'm not doing this for partisan political stuff, but I'm really curious about the thought process that led you there.
Yeah, I don't think it's too abstruse or difficult to understand, really. I've been paying close attention to the political hijinks for the last 4 years, the whole Trump term. And it seems to me that the DNC has been operating in epic bad faith. They have been unbelievably dishonest, running one scam after another. And I'm speaking as a registered Democrat, I'm still a registered Democrat. Yep. I'm not a right winger. I'm not a member of the John Birch Society. But, I think that they really the DNC, the Democratic Party, needs to get whacked pretty bad and get its mind right as a result. And I think it's gonna. And, of course, I lost a lot of friends overnight, automatically. But I'll tell you what my thought process is here. Every time I wonder about, the decision that I've made and the side that I've taken, all I have to remember is that the Democratic Party is the party that says that diversity means shut down free speech, And then I have to remind myself who they nominated as their presidential candidate. The empty suit known as Joe Biden, the empty suit and grifter known as Joe Biden. And, he's America's emperor's new clothes candidate. Absolutely everybody knows that he ain't up to the job one way or another. He's just not, he's not there. Maybe he's, I don't know whether he's 87% there or 63% there, but he's a lot not there. I think if you were a fly on the wall in his bedroom when he was taking his clothes off at night, there would be nobody there when he took his pants off. He'd just be gone. He ain't there. And, I'm not going to go along with the pretense that you can vote for him. I mean, it's a fraud. And, so between the earlier scams and frauds of Russiagate and Impeachment Gate and, all the other gates that have been open and shut over the last 3 years, I've had it with the Democratic Party. And I think they need to be, they're a wicked gang and they need to be punished. And, this is apart from the direction that they would want to take the country in. Now, I can understand why people believe that we need to address the disequity in incomes and all the other really serious economic problems that we have. But I don't see the Democratic Party offering any kind of a workable set of policies to address that. So they need to go to the woodshed, and someone's got to beat them up with a fungo bat. And I hope the voters do that.
So I'm trying to work on the metaphor. You said originally the emperor has no clothes, but then you suggested that if you were there at night when he took his clothes off, there wouldn't be any there. So it's actually the emperor's only got clothes. It's kind of a reverse metaphor.
Well, yeah, it's you're absolutely right. Totally mixed metaphor. Unlike me, I try to be real careful with the
Mr. Careful
with the literature there. But but he ain't there, and so that's the thing. And people are really ticked off at me about it. Mm-hmm. And I must say, I find it even more mystifying that they can support the kind of dishonesty that has been emanating from their party, and you know, it just ain't right.
Well,
And that's a. I'm
it's
sorry.
been
Go on.
dishonesty all around, and I there's no good outcome to this particular election as far as I'm concerned.
I happen to think that qualitatively, that Trump's buffoonery and dishonesty really don't hold a candle to what the Democrats have been up to. If it's possible to quantify it, I think it's way worse on the left.
Mm.
And I mean, you've got the situation with you've got governors and mayors allowing mobs to go around burning businesses down, including black businesses, and it's supposed to be a Black Lives Matter protest, and they're burning down the businesses and the livelihoods of black people. It's insane. And you have these idiots like Ted Wheeler and Kate Brown in Oregon, and the mayor of Chicago, and the governor of Wisconsin. This is crazy, unconscionable behavior, and they really need to get a strong message. So yeah, so I'm in favor of Trump winning the election. Yep.
Well, the part that resonated for me, to rewind a few minutes here, is this idea that thought is being shut down, right? And so I watched this most recently with hydroxychloroquine, right?
Yeah.
So now that all the data is coming in, and it's had to fight its way through an alder thicket with an external frame pack on its back, it was hard hiking. But the data is finally emerging that, hey, it actually works. And to watch, though, it wasn't just that pharma was throwing some money in to muddy things up, a la the tobacco companies of the 70s, right? It wasn't just that. It was that. But the number of people who were doctors and Fauci, all these others, who were willing to go against science and to even conduct trials where they were actively killing people in order to make whatever point they felt they needed to make, whether it was for money or because they hated Trump that much or whatever the story was, I was appalled beyond belief. So I've lost, if there was a way to vote against a big portion of the AMA and the people who behave that way, I would do it as well, because it's against all my principles and my ethics, all of them.
Well, I got to ask you, I mean, do you think that was part of, that they were so allied with the left and with the Democratic Party's campaign that?
Hold on. We're going to
Okay.
edit this part out because I got this cat that absolutely never needs to be outside until I'm on a podcast. And then it's the most urgent thing ever. Every time. Sorry about
So
that.
you're going to edit that out,
Yes,
right?
I will.
Okay.
Yes, I will.
Let me restate this then. So are you saying that what you observed was activity on the part of the left or the Democrats or the people who sympathize with them to gaslight this issue and confuse the public over hydrochloroquine?
Yeah, absolutely. There were people who, because of Trump's advocacy for it, were against it.
Yeah. Well, that's another example of the kind of dishonesty I'm talking about. Exactly.
Yeah, and it went beyond that. It was pretty mendacious all around. I mean, to the point that you had the so-called recovery trial, all capital letters, in the UK. They're like, well, we're going to finally do the be-all, end-all study. And what they did, Jim, was they took people who were already really sick, which is too late for this to work, and they knew that. And they didn't use zinc, and they didn't use azithromycin, and then they gave them toxic doses that if you did this straight out of med school, you'd get your license yanked forever and ever. But these are the preeminent doctors, allegedly, of the UK. Instead of giving people 800 milligrams, they gave them 2,400 milligrams, which is toxic, and they're already on death's bed. And then they said, look, it made them worse. And literally it was the equivalent of applying an airbag to an accident victim after the car crash and saying, wow, that seemed, airbags don't work. And it was, they literally killed, they had the worst death rate of any ICU I've ever seen, right? They were pushing high, around 30% death rates, right? Mm-hmm. Awful. Where Didier Raoult, right across the channel again, there you got France with their great food and the British sticking to their rancid pheasants hanging in the window kind of stuff, right? Right across the channel, you got Didier Raoult, and he's pumping out a 0.5% death rate, right? 30 to 0.5. And it was just, but who designs a trial knowing all of that, giving toxic doses simply to prove that it doesn't work, that's mass murder as far as I'm concerned.
Well,
Where do people go?
when I say bad faith, I really mean it.
Yep.
They are trafficking in immense bad faith, and there's really something about the boundaries of what used to be, decent behavior that way have dissolved, and the left has now put us into a fog of disinformation that is much worse than any stupid ass fib that the president is trying to put over in his comedy act on stage during his rallies. So I do think it's a qualitative difference.
Well,
Yep.
it would take a lot for me to actually believe that there was a difference anywhere in this landscape at this point in time. And one of the things would be to see the judiciary, the judges, people from both sides of the aisle decide publicly that what Jeffrey Epstein represented and what he did and how he operated was not acceptable, immoral, and that we were going to follow that wherever the crumbs led, wherever the cards landed, that we would follow that. But both parties seem to just be chirping crickets on that. At the same time that we
That's
tell
amazing.
ourselves a story that pedophilia is one of the worst things that can possibly happen, but that's the story. But then you watch the actions don't follow up. And I've just been horrified by that whole story not happening,
Yeah, and now Gies is in stir. That is Ghislaine Maxwell.
Yep.
She's in stir on a 1998 charge of trafficking or
Yeah.
it's actually not as bad as that. I forget exactly what the charge is, but it's really quite a lesser charge. I think maybe bringing underage girls across state lines or something, but instead of rape or the other things that she might have been charged with. So that's pretty suspicious. And it is absolutely astounding that ever since Jeffrey Epstein died in the New York City jail, that we haven't heard a darn thing about anything. There haven't even been any proceedings against the two guards who fell asleep. We haven't even found out why the security cameras were turned off. We don't even know whether the warden was fired. There's been absolutely no information about that at all. So yeah, we are living in a peculiar time and place, and I don't know how that's going to shake out, but it'll
Well, it's
shake
kind
out
of,
eventually.
rules for thee, but not for me,
I guess.
and I think people like their anecdotes and bite-sized pieces. So to me, one of those was Nancy Pelosi going in and getting her hair done at a time in a salon when all the other salons are shut down. She walks in, no mask, all of that stuff, right? And then
Yeah.
when it comes out, rather than just falling on her sword and saying, I shouldn't have done that, and you're absolutely right, and that doesn't look good, she blamed the salon owner for setting her up, right? It's just bizarre to me how these people think. So when you say taken to the woodshed, I do not like politics much. I don't get politically involved. I do say a pox in both houses. So we could do worse than to sweep everybody clean in this story.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, we have this horrendous, and I use that word carefully, 98% reelection rate, that just happens because of all sorts of gerrymandering and fraudulent voting systems and you name it, right? So we have a system that's pretty well entrenched in keeping things as they are, no matter how unseemly they are. And I think that's
yeah.
mad.
I think that we're reaching a kind of inflection point with that. And I kind of believe the Democratic Party is committing suicide. Something will come out the other end of that. There will be some kind of party that represents the left side of the political spectrum, but it's not going to be the DNC, the Democratic Party. It's going to be something, or they can call themselves that, but there's going to be a huge purge of that organization, and they're going to come out being something else. The Republican Party, they also really need to be fixed, changed, switched out. And I think we're going to see it. And there's going to be a tremendous amount of political disorder in the weeks ahead. I've been predicting that ever since the beginning of the year, and it's actually rolled out. We haven't seen disorder like this. Even 1968 was nothing compared to this.
Really? You think so, huh?
Oh yeah, I lived through it. And by the way, I was at the Democratic convention in Chicago in '68, where Hubert Humphrey got nominated. And we were all hoping that clean Gene McCarthy was going to be the candidate, and of course, that didn't happen. But and I wasn't actually there as a rioter or anything. I was there as kind of a larval journalist, observing history being made, which it kind of was. But that stuff all seems real innocent to what we're seeing today. Burning stuff down,
Yeah.
uh, and I think it's different. It's a different time. It's going to be really. It's really going to wash a lot of stuff away. It's going to be like a Category 5 political storm.
Yeah. Well, so let's magic prognosticator hat. How do you see this playing out? I mean, I read this great piece by Peggy Noonan who explained some of the electoral things I hadn't quite thought through, which was how mail-in voting would actually work and
Yeah.
how messy that could be, and that a lot of Democrats were actually doing mail-in compared to Republicans. And so you could find yourself in a situation where the early returns seem to say Trump won, but then stuff trickles in and nobody really knows. And maybe we don't have a 5-4 Supreme Court because we only have 4-4 to work with, or whatever. It could get messy, obviously. How do you see this going?
Well, first of all, I think the Republicans are absolutely determined to ram through a new Supreme Court justice before the inauguration, and it might not be exactly exactly before Election Day, but it could be 4 days after. And there's liable to be a lot of litigation over the mail-in voting. I wouldn't say that the big story last week was the story of the sort of planned transition integrity project coup. The transition integrity project, which was supported by some of those George Soros backed nonprofits, ran a series of war games this summer to kind of game out what the election was going to be like. And one of their strategies is really to tie up the election in as much litigation as possible, and in order to create an inconclusive outcome. And I don't, a lot of people look at that and it's scary that that group is actually planning to do that. But I don't think that they're taking into account that there are people in the government now who are also planning to counter that, and are not going to allow that to. They're not going to allow that election to be inconclusive. So we'll see what happens with the write-in votes. After all, they do have to be certified as genuine. They do have to figure out whether people signed them and whether they live at the address that it says on the ballot. And I think they're going to take a lot of care to make sure that happens. And also consider that the first time in the days after the election that somebody finds a bundle of ballots in a mail bag thrown into a drainage ditch, that's going to be the end of the whole mail-in thing, because no one will trust the process at all. So there's plenty of room for mischief in there, but I don't think it's going to end up being the determining factor in the election. And I think that the Democratic war game is probably going to fizzle, and that lawfare is not going to be able to pull this, litigating the election to death ploy across.
Well, what I, I have to laugh at this point because it's just so tragicomic for me is this whole idea that like, wow, it's going to be a mess because all this thing and mail-in voting. We're like the only country that can't manage to do voting properly that
I know.
isn't a
And
team.
you could make it really as simple as just having like a written ballot,
Yeah.
where you go in, you have to show up at the poll, you have to check
Yeah.
the box,
Yeah.
and that works. But I go into my polling place and they have this idiotic new machine that involves an optical reader and a scanned piece of paper, and I mean it's preposterous.
Yeah.
I don't understand why we even changed from the old voting machines, which were complicated enough.
Yeah.
But,
Or that you couldn't task a group of high school students to figure out how to create an app with some sort of like security features on it that would be way better than that optical scanner you're using.
yeah. Well, there's lots of ways to do it right. But anyway, we've turned it into a Chinese fire drill.
I know, but we shrug and we go, well, what are you going to do? It's just too complicated. I'm like, no, when I take out $2 from an ATM in a 7-Eleven, it's tracked and they're pretty sure it's me every time. I'm pretty sure we can do this.
Yeah,
You know?
the really striking thing is that everything's become too complicated for us. You know, we can't do anything anymore. And the truth is that a lot of this stuff isn't that complicated. We're just pretending it's that complicated,
Yep.
and we're futzing around. But this is we become a land full of unserious people.
Yeah. Unable to go through what I consider to be fairly simple logic.
Uh-huh.
So face masks for COVID, it's pretty simple logic. If you can control to have fewer of these things coming out of your mouth or going in, depending on which way you are on the sickness spectrum,
Hmm.
it's better. You start with a lower viral load. It's very simple. It's a very simple thing to communicate, and couldn't do it.
Yeah.
We had the CDC come out and go, "Hey, we think stuff's airborne." No, we don't. The WHO just corrected us by the short ones really quick. They did
Well,
that.
I'm curious. What do you make of the CDC's behavior over the last 6 months? Because it seems to me that they keep on contradicting themselves every 5 minutes.
Yeah, they do. They do. Redfield is an absolute disaster of a human being to be running anything. I wouldn't want him running that 7-Eleven we were just talking about.
Hmm.
So he's awful, and it sort of flows from there. So I view that as sort of like a little insurrection from the ranks, where somebody who actually has the data in the CDC was like, "Screw it, I'm putting this out," and hit send, and out it went. Because I reported on this stuff being airborne in February. It is airborne. I mean, all the data
Sure.
says that. So here we are in September, like can't quite figure it out yet. So to me, that's a peep from the mines, where somebody who's slaving away down there said, "I can't put up with this anymore."
Mhm.
And so those are the kinds of little mini fires that I see being burnt around. But this is really fourth turning stuff. This is what you expect after a long period of mismanaging stuff. Here we are. All I can think to do at this stage, uh, Jim, is to tend my garden, prune my trees, get the
Yeah.
soil built up, and sort of hunker. I'm in hunker
Yeah.
mode.
Yeah. Well, you're fortunate that you made some decisions that you did make, and that's put you in a position both to be very active and involved in a big project, and to have provided yourself with some sense of security. And many people in this country don't have anything like that.
Mhm.
Not only are they living paycheck to paycheck, but they're living in places that are not going to be doing too well in the future. They're going to be very disorderly. They may have problems with their food supply. A lot of these people have lost their livelihoods as well as their weekly paychecks. When you lose your livelihood, that means you have no prospect, for quite a ways out of even getting a paycheck.
Mhm.
And I can see a very desperate situation ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And many of these are self-inflicted wounds, of course. And I see California working hard to lead the pack in that regard.
Yeah.
I saw recently that I think, if I have this right, they were talking about potentially taking the top tax rate, which is currently a punishing 13.5% for income tax, and for just the toppest earners, of course, so ramming that up to maybe 58% or somewhere in that zone.
Huh.
And of course, all you have to do is like open Google and type what happens when you tax people really hard, and you find they leave your state, right?
Yeah.
you know and then once they leave, you get caught in this downward spiral, because the more of those people leave, and guess what, some of them tend to be business owners and real industrious folks, and at any rate your tax base erodes. And the one thing that doesn't occur to a state like California seems to be, maybe we shouldn't be taxing people this hard at all. What are the programs we're running, and do we need them all? It's some sort of a rationalization process that says, if we can't do everything, what would we cut? And that's not even a conversation I'm aware they're having.
Well, it's become politically a one-party state, and that's never a good thing, because that means that there's never any really serious discussion over policy.
Mm.
But speaking of demographics, one of the things that characterizes this fourth turning or long emergency or whatever you want to call it,
Hmm.
is that there are going to be great movements of people, and they have already begun. And one of my hopes is, and it seems to be going in that direction for the moment, it may be heading in that direction. A lot of people are leaving New York City and Chicago and other large cities, San Francisco, Los Angeles. My idea is that the places that are going to be successful will be the smaller towns and the smaller cities, because um, just about everything that's organized at the giant scale is getting into trouble. Whether it's a national chain store or a big corporation or a university that is uh, having problems with its business model. All of these things are threatened, and government, including government at the highest levels. So I see a movement back to small towns and small cities, and also to the agricultural landscape out there. Most young people are not really mentally prepared to do this. It's never been something that they've considered, and it's never been served up as an option for them.
Hmm.
But I think that's the direction we're heading in. And I'm hoping, for example, that the old factory village that I live in, which has a number of really good hydro sites for industry at a scale that might be the scale that we're going to be resetting to. I'm hoping that young people will come to towns like this and start looking at the opportunities, because there are a lot of opportunities in what will be a pretty comprehensive reorganization of daily life in America and of production.
Hmm.
It's not going to be so much about uh, the whole consumption side is going to retreat a little bit, or maybe a lot, and the production side is going to have to go forward, because we're going to have to think of new ways to produce things that we need, and things that represent real social capital and real wealth.
Hmm.
And that's a tremendous amount of work. It involves all kinds of things, like figuring out the transportation issue, figuring out how we're going to move from industrial giant scale farming down to a scale of farming that is consistent with the realities of the future.
Hmm.
How we're going to reorganize local commerce, because I'm convinced that Main Street is going to be the new mall. And we're seeing this playing out. The malls are dying. The chain stores that are even freestanding outside the malls, they're dying. Really, all that stuff that's organized at the giant scale is folding up its tent. And so there'll be a tremendous need for young people to start thinking about reorganizing these local, very complex, fine-grained local economies of wholesaling, retailing, jobbing. And I don't think they're thinking about it right now. It'll be self-evident after a while. But it's that old Schopenhauer thing. When you go through a paradigm shift, people at first ridicule the idea, and then they violently oppose it, and then uh, an inflection point happens. They accept it as self-evident reality.
Hmm.
So that's coming. I really want to see these young people recognize the opportunities that are out there in the reorganization of our national life, and start to do something about it. And I don't know, part of it is, how do you organize whatever remaining real capital we have to, finance some of that activity?
Well, I'm glad you brought up the long emergency, because one of the things I wanted to talk to you about is one of my side passions is I still track the oil industry. I still think it's relevant. I think people's eyes are completely off the ball on this thing. And by the
Sure.
way, the U.S. shale miracle is just a nightmare right now. It's just imploding, right? So I talk to
Hmm.
people in the business, and the only drilling that's happening is like super desperate companies that have to like maintain leases, or nobody's making money at these current prices. And it's been going on long enough now that, what are we, like probably 6-7 months into the oil collapse of prices,
Yeah.
that some of these wells have just lost pretty much half of their production.
Hmm.
Has been squandered in the furnace of capital destruction. So as I look at that, I think the Federal Reserve is going to get inflation, because it measures it as rising prices. It doesn't quite understand that inflation is actually what happens when you put too much money in a system.
Hmm.
So we're going to get it good and hard.
Mhm.
and it's going to happen. Art Berman's talking about like maybe U.S. has 5-6 million barrels per day of production in June of next year. Um,
Wow. And let's remind listeners that we achieved 13 million barrels a day at the end of 2019, and it's fallen to 10 million now after 7 months of COVID.
Yeah, it's actually under 10. We're pushing about 9.5 right now. According to,
Yeah,
to the EIA, I think they're a little optimistic on that too.
yeah.
So we'll,
But that's
they take a while.
amazing.
Yeah,
That's an amazing crash of production.
yeah, and that's just what happens when you don't drill like fiends,
Yeah.
in the
Well,
between
and
tip.
that's what happens when the wells, deplete by 60% after 1 year.
Yep.
So
So at any rate, imagine, if you will, with me that somehow a vaccine comes along, or we just realize, okay, we have to live with COVID. It's endemic. It's kind of like our new malaria. It's there. It's bad. It's worse if you're older. Whatever. We learn to manage it, and we get back into things. And we're like, well, where's all our oil? And according to Art, it's not coming back because it just takes, unless we nationalized it. But even if you did, and you said today we're going to throw national money at this, taking over Diamondback's acreage, and we're just going to drill as fast as we know how, given money. It still takes too much time to sort of get it up and going again, given the reality.
yeah.
Uh, I think
Well,
we're going
there
to
are so
see
many other problems that have
shortages.
spun off of that are not going back to normal. I heard a figure today that 97,000 small businesses in America have gone down and are not coming back. That's a staggering figure. And when you recognize the communities that are tied into those businesses and what's happening to them, it's really an awesome picture. And that's further proof that we are going to really need to reorganize American life. And like I said earlier, it also means that there are opportunities to do that, because remember that all those businesses out there, apart from the tragedy of people having lost the businesses, um, a lot of the infrastructure of the business is still there, and they can be sold off for half, 50 cents on the dollar or whatever it is, and someone else can have a chance to run that business. And we'll see how that works out. But if I was a young person, I'd be out there scouting for businesses that were available that had gone down that could be restarted, because you're going in there without the obligations and the debts that the other person had, and you can start over again.
Well, I think this is what the Fed is nominally scared of, is this idea that once you get in a deflationary spiral, my expenses are your income. And once too many businesses fold, the whole chain stops working, right?
Yeah.
It's the
Well,
whole hip bone is connected to the thigh bone thing, right? And on and on and
right.
on, right? So if my restaurant gets closed by government fiat, and then I have to close that, and then my mortgage doesn't get paid, and then the food suppliers don't have a place to sell, and blah blah blah. It goes on and on and on, right? Um, that's what they're worried about. But then all the Fed manages to do is to throw money and make billionaires more billionaire. That's
Yeah.
that's all they've seemed to figure out how to do, is keep stocks perversely elevated, which is to me, it's throwing burrs under the saddle.
Yeah, and all it really does is provoke more political grievance and resentment,
Yeah.
and friction and heat, and eventually, people burning down more cities. And we're probably going to have to go through some of that. And when we do, and we don't know how bad this disorder is going to get, but it could be something like a civil war. It's not going to be 1863 all over again, but it could be pretty disorderly and violent. You could have states just trying to check out. You could have just a big mess. But when we're done with it, this is still a big country with a lot of resources still, and it is going to be reorganized. I think it'll be reorganized at a humbler level of activity. But remember that there's a difference between growth and activity. You can have a lot of activity that isn't represented as conventional classical neoclassical economics growth.
Hmm.
And it still means a lot of people are busy doing something useful and productive. It just isn't what was going on before, and it doesn't work in the old business model. But there's going to be a new business model for whatever emerges from this. I also believe that societies are necessarily emergent and self-organizing, and so whatever we come through, however we come through this age of chaos, reality will inform us what we need to do to reorganize, and we'll do it. We'll respond.
Hmm.
It's just that it will involve a lot of stuff that we're not expecting, and tasks that we had never planned on, and things that people who are planning to have careers in art history and marketing are going to find that they're going to be farm managers. And people who thought that they were going to be hedge funders are going to be running hardware stores. And if we're lucky enough to have hardware, if we can make a few things, and that's going to be real different.
Yeah, well, it's very much like you outlined in the long emergency, different set of triggers and conditions. Honestly, it's just a long series of mistakes as far as I'm concerned. It stretches back financially and monetarily back to Alan Greenspan, who really
Mhm.
liked being the maestro, and he got his whole ego involved and really lost the plot line badly. Did all this bailout stuff, encouraged all this moral hazard. Happened again, and here we are at this like ridiculous level where I don't know if you caught this, but the FinCEN reports come out, right? And
Mhm.
so I don't know who it was, maybe Business Insider or somebody like that, maybe BuzzFeed, I forget. But somebody digs in and looks and says, "Oh my God, the banks have just been running this international cartel of criminality." Like, well, of course they have. They make money at it, and nobody ever
Mhm.
goes to jail. What are you going to do, right? But like for all these people who say, "Well, 2008 was bad. We dodged a bullet." I'm like, no, no, we ingested many bullets in that story. We're just like we learned nothing, and we're just supersized the whole shit show. And now we're supposed to somehow, limp along, and this is going to recover if we elect Joe Biden. In some people's minds, somehow this all makes sense. I can't make sense of it because the mistakes we made were only compounded at each turn of events, and I don't see any way
Mhm.
out of it now.
Well, as you know, I have my new theory of history, which I have been applying to everything in the
Yeah.
last year and a half. And my new theory of history is real simple. Things happen because they seem like a good idea at the time,
Yeah.
right? And things happen because people make choices, both individually and collectively. And
Mhm.
we made a lot of bad choices in the USA, in the 21st century. Going back into the 20th century, we started making some really bad choices. And the ones that Alan Greenspan set into motion were choices like, let's remove price discovery from the banking system. Let's remove the time value of money
Mhm.
from the interest rate equation, and let's see if capital can actually work that way. And of
Why
course, it
not?
doesn't. It doesn't. You all you end up with is extraordinary financial perversions and implosions. And that's what we got, because we made that very bad collective decision at the very top that those things were okay,
Hmm.
and they're not, and we're going to learn the hard way.
Yeah. Well,
Sometimes history has to just whack you over the head with 30 inches of rebar.
the problem I have with all this is just the injustice of it. So the people who get hurt the most are the ones who deserve it the least in these stories, and vice
Uh-huh.
versa. And that bothers me a lot. If I could wave my magic wand and ask for and get something, it would be accountability. I just want accountability because
Hmm.
I'm a huge believer in that Charlie Munger quote: "You show me the incentive, I'll show you the outcome." Right.
Hmm.
So we watched HSBC, the bank, get caught in Mexico designing their teller windows to fit a specific brand of suitcase, which would, a certain amount of $100 bills would fit in. They got caught red-handed money laundering, right? Loretta Lynch came down hard on them, fined them 1.9 billion. She was so proud of that. Nobody went to jail, right? Like,
Yeah.
oh my goodness. And then we see, somebody get pulled over and shot by the police because they didn't obey fast enough, and it's just two sets of rules. That's what
So,
I see as a lot of the friction going on right now. And there's no way to solve that until you get accountability, evenly
mhm,
stratified across the,
mhm.
the culture again.
I'm not sure we're going to see that in the banking system. I think that the bankers will only be made accountable when they lose their fortunes, and I think that could happen pretty easily. Where this bubble can only go. We've been saying it for a long
I
time, but
know.
this extraordinary bubble only has so far to be blown up, and then it's going to really pop. And you know, and then the right people are going to have a problem.
Yeah. Well, that's the macro. On the micro scale, what are you doing for sanity and fun?
Sanity and fun. Well, I happen to be very busy. The political situation is so perverse and so rich that it provides no end of material for me to write about, and that's good for me. Uh, Unfortunate for a lot of other people because they're suffering. Um, I, I also purchased a little homestead about 8 years ago, and I've been working on that all summer. And so, I've been bringing in potatoes like a Ukrainian peasant last week, and hoping that I have enough food for the winter. I laid in a lot of other supplies. Um, I'm hoping to run this place uh, as well as I can. I've discovered that it's very hard to do a lot of these things. It's hard to grow fruit. I planted about 30 fruit trees 8 years ago, and it's hard to get fruit out of them. They're not bearing that well,
Hmm.
and I got a lot to learn. And the chickens are pretty easy. I'm not running any other animals right now. I think you have plans to have quite a few more animals than I do. Of course, you got a lot more land. What are your animal plans?
Oh, my plans are to skinny down our animals. So I don't know if it's coming through on the microphone, but we got 4 cows. They're out in the field, and one of them I've named Karen. She complains about everything.
Does she tell
Like
you what to do?
she complains about everything. So if we were mob grazing, so we move them to a new paddock almost every day, and if she doesn't like the quality of the paddock she's being moved to, she just moves and moves and moves and complains. And the other 3 cows are just, they don't care. They're like, oh my god, grass. They're happy as can be, right? But this one complains and complains. And she complains all day long. So she's a complainer, but she's going in the freezer at some point soon.
Oh,
We got 2 pigs that got too big, and they'll be going in the freezer. And my stress in this story is I don't know if I can find enough freezer space for what's coming. So
oh yeah, yeah,
we'll be making some social capital, I think, and
yeah.
distributing
Well,
meat.
this is the first time you raise pigs, isn't it?
It is, and I like
How'd
them a
that
lot.
go?
It went very well. I like them. People said they're going to smell a lot, and that's not true if you keep them well carboned. So we had a couple of old rolls of mulch hay, those big ones, and we just kept throwing hay in there, and they were fine. And I loved their services. They root stuff up. So we put
Yeah,
them in a nasty patch of poison ivy, just the worst. And they just happily just rooted it all up and ate it. So
really.
I am thrilled with that action.
Can you move them around and have them do that to various
You
parts of your
can.
property?
You can, and the fence is literally a 12-inch high fence, one of those woven ones with all the
Yeah,
little
yeah.
stakes, and it's white and it's electric, right?
It's
So
electric. Yeah.
yeah, you just move that you just pick the stakes up and put it in a new spot, and they then happily go there, but they will not cross the fence.
Have you
After
had a pig drive yet, where you had to move them from point A to point B and drive them across the North 40?
No, we had a pig breakout one day, but you just rattle the grain bucket and they follow you right back into their enclosure. So that's
That's good.
yeah.
So you haven't had cows before, have you?
Nope. Nope. First
Oh, so
time.
that's all new.
Yeah, and the stress this year was we've got a great field, but this is one of the more severe droughts in the last
Yeah.
100 years in this part of the woods. So
Yeah.
fields do better when they get water. So it's been a bit of a
Yeah.
struggle to keep them fed, and because we're on that problem, everybody also is having the same problem. So hay didn't grow well, and everybody needs hay. So there's a whole scramble to find hay for the
Yeah.
winter because we're keeping 2 over the winter.
So you're only going to slaughter one cow,
2.
or two steers? Are they steers or cows?
We got a steer and then a cow. Yep.
Okay. Are you doing any milking or anything?
No, no,
I
no.
mean, that's a whole other thing.
Yeah, 7-day a week thing.
7 day a
So,
week thing. Plus, you need
yeah,
all that stainless steel equipment.
Yep.
Um, have you had any visitors from the state ag
N-
officers?
no, not yet.
You expect that?
No, yeah, yeah, that'll happen. But we have all the paperwork; it's all above board. So
Uh-huh.
we got a good person who hooked us up with that longtime farmer.
Uh-huh.
So yeah,
Have you got any help?
we do have some help.
Because there was a kid who called me who had interned in permaculture in Israel, and he was about 20 years old, and he was missing. He was going to skip his college year, and I gave him your phone number and said call him. He might need some help, and I never heard from him again.
Oh, we went. I sent him a couple emails and said
You
call
heard
me,
from this guy?
and he said he would, and then he didn't. So
20 years old.
I
Yeah.
guess his plans changed. So
But you've got other people.
oh yeah, oh yes,
Are
lots.
they interning, or are you accepting interns?
We are. We've got a bright shiny couple coming in January to sort of suss out the situation. And
Hmm.
Evie's daughter Jade is here. She's 19, just having a blast doing this stuff.
Hmm.
We had another person that sort of fell through, and then I've got another guy coming out on Friday to take a look. And so we have a lot of people who would like to come. The reality of it, though, is it's basically we'll give you room and board, pretty good
Yeah.
deal, but then we're going to work you hard.
Yeah.
Those are the terms right now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've had ideas, in the books I wrote, where that whole situation kind of evolves into a form of feudal relationships,
Yeah, well,
because people simply have to find a place to be, and there already are an awful lot of people out in America who really don't have a place in this world, and that whole idea of having a place in this world, both vocationally, geographically, psychologically, has been kind of trashed. But it's terribly important to people.
yeah.
You can take it too far and be in a situation where you never go more than 5 miles away from the place you live in your whole lifetime, and that was, how things were in the 12th century. But and we don't have to do that, but I think there are an awful lot of people who need a place in this world,
Hmm. I'm
and
working hard with, Evie and I were trying to figure out how many people could this parcel of land we're on support, you know?
yeah,
So, that's an equation we don't know how to solve yet, but it's definitely more than us. So we're going to work that out. And I do think that we end up in a situation where community becomes really important again. And there's your tight, most local community, and then there's your larger community. So we're working on both of those and doing the best we can.
what are
So
the state regs about putting up a bunkhouse?
you'd be surprised. There are quite a lot of them. So
Well,
uh,
I would imagine there are a lot.
yeah,
You have to have two entrances and a handicapped elevator and all kinds of
yeah,
stuff.
and you have to have a lit egress sign because in case somebody
Yeah,
can't figure out how to get out of a 12 by 12 sort of space
yeah,
without help,
yeah,
and then you have to have hot and cold running water, which means you need to have a Title V septic system, but you also need to have a well. And it's because you have that many people, it needs to be a commercial well, which is designated as a public water supply, which means that you have to have state testing once a month. We're hip deep in figuring all this out.
oh man,
My hope is that once things get difficult enough that a lot of these regulations just disappear again. I'd love to get
yeah,
back to common sense, which is if somebody can't find their way out of a 12 by 10 box in an emergency without lit help, maybe they weren't the right people for this job in the first place.
yeah. That was one of my ideas in the in the long emergency, was that uh, eventually the municipalities and states and counties would simply be too broke to enforce a lot of their stupid rules,
Yeah.
and the impediments to being able to do something.
Yeah, and we're hip deep in it because our project across the street is rehabbing an older building that was built in 1926. Codes were what they were then. Today they're so different that the engineers are like, oh, you'll have to beef this up, beef that up, beef this up.
Mm,
These are all the rules. And I just said, well, it seems to have stood for nearly 100 years without any of that help. You know,
yeah.
and it's not like they sort of beefed the rules up a little bit. The snow load calculations have tripled in that time. Now you have to be
Hmm.
able to account for carrying 3 times the weight. And I'm like, well, yeah, you got a point there, but it didn't collapse over the last 100 years. So that should count for, that doesn't count. That doesn't count. There should be
Oh
some
man.
sort of like rule that says, well, if it stood for 100 years, it's probably cool. You know, nope.
So you're facing major structural issues?
All sorts of stuff. Yeah, usual stuff.
Hmm.
It's not unexpected, but it's the part that's I find personally less savory is that the people who are in charge of enforcing these, right, the various commissions and building inspectors, they just kind of shrug and go, "Hey, these are the rules,"
All right.
you know, as if
Right.
there was no agency or no, there's, what are you gonna do, right? There's like as if their hands are completely tied, um, and and a lot of these rules are just really nonsensical, and I fear that they're just going to become more so over time unless
Hmm.
something causes them to go the other direction, right? So,
Oh yeah, no, I think that the various disorders that we're going through will express themselves in the regulatory realm. That they will become disorderly too. And
yeah.
yeah, I mean, I saw this in Detroit where we had a new urbanist conference there 3 or 4 years ago, and there was all this rehabbing of buildings going on all over the city in these various nodes where young people had acquired buildings one way or another. And one of the major attractions was that Detroit was so broke that they had absolutely no enforcement officers to go around and enforce the codes, so people could do pretty much what they wanted to do. And so that's one of the virtues of being in that kind of a imploded society over there.
Hmm.
But that kind of thing is liable to happen on a pretty widespread level. It doesn't mean that every place in America is going to look like Detroit or act like Detroit, but it does mean that there's going to be probably a hell of a lot less ability to regulate and persecute people for just going about their business.
Yep. Yep. And let's get back to common sense again. That would be just a wonderful thing. And I believe parts of Vermont have this. They literally have no building codes in part of them,
Hmm.
and they say you go ahead and build what you want, but they let you know, they're like, if it turns out that you build something that falls on your own head or is structurally unsound, good luck selling it. So it's kind of like up to you, do what you want, and
Hmm.
wouldn't you know it, people tend to build stuff that doesn't fall down, left to their
Yeah.
own devices.
Duh.
It's just, and so, but I would love to see that return of common sense, and where we get to sort of make our own determinations about what makes sense, what doesn't,
Hmm.
and and then things tend to sort themselves out. Right here, right now, all these, you got these people who really want to preserve this exactly as it, the natural scene, and I'm as much of a preservationist as anybody, but I'd like to remind them that 100 years ago this was all sheep. So these
Yeah.
woods that you're so desperately trying to preserve weren't woods just 100 years ago, and 8,000 years before that there was a mile of ice here, and things change. So the question isn't how do we lock things in lucite so they don't change. The question is what do we want it to look like, right, and why?
Yeah. And how do you want it to behave? How do you want it to act? And in what way? For what? And for whom?
Right.
And we
Yeah.
face the same thing here in Washington County, New York, which is only about 60 miles away from you, probably. And it was a sheep herding when all the people who farmed these hills in the 1830s and 40s went down the Erie Canal to go to Indiana and Ohio. That's when they turned to sheep herding, and all of the forested hills here were all meadows and pastures. And then in 1900, when the industrial dairying operation was all kind of penciled out with the Holstein cow, the bulk refrigeration, and the electric milking machine, then they all became dairy farms, and now they're uh, leaving dairy farming behind and moving on to something else. And there's an awful lot of farmland up here that young people could acquire and do something with. And we're very fortunate that we're about as far away from New York City, Boston, and Montreal as you can be, where we are. And it had the weekenders have not bought up all the land, so a lot of opportunity in a place like this.
Well, good. I hope you find those industrious young people. A lot of them, there's a lot of them out there right now.
I hope
And
they find us.
yeah.
I'm not quite sure what you got to do to get them, But they are look, they're leaving New York. I hear every week about young people who are splitting from New York and going somewhere else. I'd like to get them up here.
Well, good. So, put the word out. You don't need, you just got to find some room and board for them. Trust me.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's people looking for that opportunity all over the place. So, and it's hard work though, but it's got a lot of meaning and purpose, and it feels good. So
I bet.
the trade that I'm executing here, besides room and board, is I will teach you how to do stuff. And this is something that comes up with me and a good friend of mine who's project managing across the street. Is we actually, it turns out we know how to do a lot of stuff, and we know that because we watch the young people come in, some of whom are disembodied, have
Hmm.
spent their whole life in public school and somehow never, and played video games or whatever the story was, but they're just almost like not, they're just not right here yet, and so we've had guys like we're like, okay, do everything, just paint the side of this house, but don't go near the trim, stay 2 inches away from the trim, come back, and like trim's just like been like, then you explain it one more time, and then you watch them and they just start painting right
The
over the
guy's
trim.
living in his phone.
It's just like, what's happening here, and but through somehow through the school of life, I learned how to build things, and that includes both framing and finish carpentry. I learned how to do tile, I learned how to do sheetrock, a little bit of electrical work, plumbing, of course. I know how to plant stuff, I know how to fix stuff, I know when an engine's, it's just stuff, and I can't tell you where I learned it. It was just
Hmm.
what we did when I was growing up,
Hmm.
and so I
Hey, are
realized,
you running a wood stove there?
yeah, of course.
What is it? What kind is it?
Got a Hearthstone over here. It's not the one I would have bought, but it's kind of nice. It's got a cook surface on it.
Yeah, I'm about to install a yodel.
I love yodels. I wish I had a yodel.
Well,
This came with a house, this one.
I made the mistake of putting an airtight fireplace insert in a
Mm,
few years ago.
yeah.
Doesn't really put out,
No.
and I had to change it out.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, if you know one who needs one, I'm getting rid of it.
Yeah. Sorry. Don't know. But you're going to love the yodel.
Yeah,
Love that.
I imagine I
Life
will.
changer.
And
Yeah.
it does have a nice top on it,
You'll be able to
for
take the hat
the.
off and everything. It's going to be amazing.
Yeah, it'll be nice.
That'll be good. Well, thank you so much for your time today. And of course, we can direct people to your blog over there.
Yes, it is at www.kunstler.com. I don't know if we're allowed to say the name of it on this podcast because it's a little bit profane, but
You can. Feel free.
I can. It's called Clusterfuck Nation.
Yes,
Comes
it
out
is.
every Monday and Friday, and it comes out at 10:15 Eastern time. It's a lot of fun. I usually try to cook up some good gags because, as Samuel Beckett said, nothing is funnier than unhappiness.
Plus time. You have to add
Yeah.
plus time. All right. Well, hey, thanks for your time. And by the way, we have to get you out here at some point.
I'm dying to come out. The only thing that's keeping me is I got to find somebody to watch my chickens for a night or two
Yeah.
when I come over. You got a place for me to stay there?
Yeah, we could work something out as long as you're coming from a state that's not higher than us on the COVID list. We're
Oh,
good.
okay. I don't know where we are right now. I'm in New York, of course.
Yeah, I
I
think
heard that Vermont just imposed a 2-week quarantine on anybody coming from here. So
oh,
things are, things are moving in that direction again, unfortunately.
yeah, we got a bunch of rules we got to follow because we got a whole public
We'll
thing.
figure that out, though.
We'll figure it out.
If I can just zip over for the day, I'll do that.
All right.
It's
Very good.
probably about a 2-hour drive.
Excellent. Well, let's get it done.
Okay, dude.
All right. Thank you much. And we'll see you next time.